lounging, son.
Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and today I'm going to be doing a flip through of a book a long time in the making on this. I've been sitting on this book for a little while. Don't know why it took me so long to actually jump in and read this book, because I was seeking it out for a long time. The minute it was announced, it's The Absolute Swamp Thing by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. So I've read bits and pieces of this run. You know, I did go through the first appearance with Swamp Thing, which is a different version than the Alec Holland. That was in House of Secrets 92. Did an episode on that. It's also represented in here, but this also has 13 issues that Len Wein wrote, all the 10 issues that Bernie Wrightson drew, and then also Nestor Redondo did some art on the last 3 issues that are collected in here. But amazing book. They did a phenomenal job reproducing this. I know a lot of people have commented on The Absolute Swamp Thing by Alan Moore and the way it was recolored and how it's on the bright white paper. They did something different for this, and let me tell you, greatly appreciated as a fan, and I cannot wait to show this off. Another thing that I love about the Swamp Thing Absolute Editions is they have this like kind of mossy feel to the cover, and just a great image, and then you can see it on the... Can't really tell by the texture on it, but they just... Such a great reproduction of this. Such a great presentation. Absolute Editions by DC. Probably my favorite way to collect something, especially if it's one of my favorite stories and they release it this way. I always double dip. Sometimes it's a triple dip if I have the singles in the hardcover or trade. One of my favorite characters, and I love how they do this too in the Absolute Edition. You get the pencils and stuff. You get this was the original art before it was, colored and stuff like that. And shout out to José Villarrubia for the color restoration. Phenomenal job. He did such a great job. And I love that they don't, because he just restored it, they didn't give him the colorist credit, which they did change in the Alan Moore Swamp Thing. They did change who it was colored by because it was completely recolored. Here it's not recolored, it's just restored to match as close to possible as those originals. I love this for Len and Bernie, who both passed away in 2017 in the same year. So love that they've finally collected this in this format. Just like it was long overdue for me to read it, it was long overdue for them to collect this. I feel like Alan Moore has always, his run, it was Steve Bissett, John Toddleman, was always celebrated amongst readership. But this is the money right here. This is what should have been done first and then led into that. But, they did it, so I can't complain too much. Get a great introduction by Len Wein from 1991, talking about the genesis of the creation of Swamp Thing and the decision to, they didn't want to move forward with doing an ongoing, but when they did, they decided to kind of change a little bit of the origin, a little bit of the backstory of Swamp Thing, and make it a new character. And then Christine Vallada was Len Wein's his wife, and she did a great introduction too. And this was written in 2022, around the same time that this was done. Liz Wrightson did a nice little intro as well, nice little forward. I really dig that they got all of that in here. And you'll notice, I don't know if you can see it too well on the camera, but the background of these pages is not white. It's a beige, off-white color. So it kind of lends itself to look like almost newsprint, but not quite. And you'll see like a lot of these colors definitely match the recent facsimile issue that I flipped through. I won't get too much into this again. If I did already go through this not even a month ago. So just want to show it off to show like what a great job the color restoration is on here. And again, it's a short story, iconic cover right here. Introduction to this new Swamp Thing. In my opinion, one of the greatest creations. Len Wein, his story, his writing, his script. I mean, his script is just... It's like reading fine literature, in my opinion. The way he can describe a scene through narration, or and even this, like Swamp Thing doesn't even talk. All of it is thought balloon, and that's something that doesn't change until much later. But he's already fully entrenched in the Swamp Thing persona at this point. Before we're, flipped back and we get the backstory of Alec and his wife, Linda, and how, they're coming up with this, this biorestorative formula, and everybody wants in on it, right? Like everybody's going to try to steal it. So he's visited by these, this group, the Conclave, and he turns them down. These guys aren't having it. And they're like, another way we can get it done, basically. And they make their threats. Matt Cable, who's going to be a main side character in this, warns them, you got to get out of here. They're like, no, we got to finish the work that we've set out to do. Those guys from the Conclave send this dog and they wire him. And so now they're spying on Alec and Linda. They're coming up with a way to steal this formula, and they knocking him down, blowing up his laboratory. And as he runs, lit a flame from the chemicals, jumps into the swamp. And as history has told us, Swamp Thing is created that day. And even here, as Linda's mourning Alec, she doesn't realize that he's now been created into this swamp creature, and he's unaware of, doesn't know how he got here, what he's become. And again, one of the greatest creations in comic books. And this is where, and then Linda dies after getting shot and refusing to, help the Conclave. And Alec comes and we do see him, he screams out no, and knows who he is, but he doesn't understand how he's become this monster. And just such great art. I mean, the pain in the eyes of Swamp Thing. Bernie Wrightson and Len Wein, to me, are one of the most dynamic creative duos in comic books history. The magic that they created together with this character, sets it up for years to come. And obviously, he's gone on to have a lot of great runs. The Alan Moore one, Rick Veitch, Mark Millar has done some stuff. Andy Diggle has done some stuff. Scott Snyder has done some stuff. And even Len Wein, before he passed, he did work on one more Swamp Thing story with the great Kelly Jones, who definitely will cover that on the channel sometime. But, I love throughout this, basically Swamp Thing, these almost are one and dones, but at the same time have a connective tissue that leads throughout each issue. It always kind of leads into the next one. And he's going after these weird creatures, doesn't understand where they're coming from. And this is where we meet one of his arch enemies. We meet Arcane. His whole thing is he wants to live forever, and he's tried to make these creatures to kind of transfer his mind into, and it doesn't work. So now he wants to manipulate Alec and take over his body. Things don't go the way he planned, and we're going to see him again later, but he is such a central figure to the Swamp Thing mythos. And not only is he a central figure, we learn through this story that there's another Arcane, and that's Abigail. And that becomes Swamp Thing's wife. They end up having a kid. She's introduced because, as Arcane has fallen seemingly to his death, there's more to come. And this is where we see Abigail, right? And Swamp Thing's in this town, and we see this Patchwork Man, which to me is almost like a Frankenstein type character, right? And who is it? It's Arcane's brother, and he was experimented on by his own brother as he tried to, save him. And Abigail is Arcane's niece, and just a whole, great backstory. And we're only going into the third issue, when all this is introduced. And Matt Cable, he doesn't realize that Alec has become Swamp Thing, so he blames this Swamp Thing creature, in his eyes, this monster, for the deaths of his friends Alec and Linda. So he's constantly on the hunt, and Abigail now goes with him. They're hunting him throughout. And like I said, he's fighting this Patchwork Man, but to me it's more of a Frankenstein monster. And Arcane is in the place of Dr. Frankenstein. Get this Wolfman-like character. So it's he's a monster fighting monsters. It's fantastic. And it reminds me of the Hulk, but this is a kinder, gentler, softer character. And some of this I've read for the first time, so it was completely new experience. I have never read this in its entirety. I've read bits and pieces. I have a couple of the single issues from this run, but not a ton of them. So it was really great to see this. So yeah, I can't necessarily match these next to the originals to see the coloring. They're not garish. Usually when you see these reprints and stuff, the colors don't look right because the colors were intended to be printed with newsprint in mind. So then when they print them in these weird colors, it doesn't feel right. This is I think José Villarrubia is just as equal of a star creatively for this book because of the work he put in to restore this coloring. And I can imagine Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson would definitely be proud. And we get this like witch character, the water crashing, the weight of Swamp Thing coming up through the water. Such a breathtaking book, beautiful. And you really just get to see this tortured soul, misunderstood, not understanding kind of like throughout. How is he in this way? How is he this strong? Why his arm getting cut off, but yet it can reform? So he has no idea what's going on. He's discovering it just as we, the readers, are discovering who he is. And kind of treated like a Frankenstein's monster here, like where you got pitchforks and stuff and they're coming after him. He's just so misunderstood. And all the while, this guy that was supposedly his friend is hunting him. And he can't really talk, so he can't really convey what's going on. So you see how he's like talking to them, but he's talking to them in his mind. And then he meets like himself and Linda. So now he's like not understanding how that came in. And like there's this weird watchmaker and just like creating people from nothing. It's just so weird. So many weird like concepts in here that to me, like this is equal footing for me now. With the Alan Moore stuff. At times, I would say there's even issues in here I prefer to some of the issues of that run. And then there's this great story, the one with Batman, and how Swamp Thing is hunting somebody down at the same time, the people from the Conclave, at the same time, Batman is hunting this guy down, not realizing that they're going after the same person. Just cool to see, like, Batman in this setting where like he doesn't know Swamp Thing and he just thinks he's a monster because Commissioner Gordon lets him know that there's this guy running on the streets and we got to stop him before there's a citywide panic. But even as they come and like when they finally do meet, Batman's going after Swamp Thing, yet he won't fight him at first. He keeps like hiding. He's like, I can't fight him. I have to make him understand. How am I going to do it? And Batman's just like, oh, he's probably preparing some sneak attack. I've got to take him out. I've got a surprise or two myself. And then finally Swamp Thing's had enough. And Batman throws a punch and he literally stops it cold just by throwing up his hand. And he's like, oh, sorry. Your blind dedication to duty can sometimes make you most annoying. And then he knocks him out. And then just goes on his way. And that's the last interaction we have between the two of them before they both meet the same person that are going after. And he just kind of like shoves Batman out of the way. He's like, I'm not going to let you stop me from doing what I have to do. They go their separate ways. Fun, one-off story. Like, again, that everything is connected. Everything kind of leads to the next thing. And I love this one, too, because, this old guy that he saves from a bear being attacked, he brings him back to this city, and we learn that this guy was experimenting with, magic and any way to restore these minds that were the livelihood of his people. So he goes to the occult and supernatural. And he's left. And as he brings it back, everybody's going to attack him. But then the son of the old man's like, hey, look, he saved him. So now he's finally getting some sort of like warm reception where they're like taking care of him and stuff as he's sitting here. Definitely a far cry from what he's had to experience before. And then we go after this weird, like fleshy, I would call him like a creature of the red, which is something that comes later because we learn later on that Swamp Thing is part of the green, right? He's an avatar of the green. This guy almost feels like he's like something of the red. He talks about like, you cannot hope to deny Mangala. Mangala is eternal, the giver of all things. It was Mangala who decreed the birth of life on your world and bestowed him with the capacity for mindless violence. So he's just so creepy and he's like telling this whole backstory to Swamp Thing of like how he came to be. And he's taken out. And this is something that I think comic book writers could do well to like maybe harken back to. Instead of just writing for the arc, write these stories that can be, told in one issue, but can connect further. We don't get enough of that. So I can see why sometimes people say they have a hard time kind of finding an entry point. I mean, there's always an entry point. I think it depends on like the shop you go to and who you ask. This is what I'm going to recommend people now for Swamp Thing. This is such a great entry point. And this is the single issue that I went through, issue 8. I've done the flip through of this on the channel. But yeah, highly recommend this. The issues by Bernie Wrightson are amazing, but the Nestor Redondo issues are just as great. He does a great job of taking the baton from Bernie pairing very well with Len Wein stories. You know, we get this like time travel story where Swamp Thing keeps getting thrust through time with this guy that like stole from his wife to become immortal. Just really great stuff. It caps it off at the end with this interview with Michael W.M. Kaluta, Alan Weiss, and Louise Simonson talking about how they were models for Bernie Wrightson when he was doing the art for this book. And then we get the photos of them. Pretty cool to see this material. I don't think it's ever been collected before. Maybe I'm wrong. But we also get some great scans of the original layouts and interior art. Scott Dunbier, need that Swamp Thing artist edition. I need the Bernie Wrightson Swamp Thing. Let's make it happen, dude, because obviously this art is out there and nobody makes an artist edition better than Scott Dunbier, man. I mean, the stuff that he does is just, he does God's work when he's doing it. But this, if this is the next best thing, is getting to see these absolute editions put this kind of back matter material in here, then I'll take what I can get. And by the way, who came up with the absolute edition? Scott Dunbier. He's also the one that had this great idea to make collections like this. Beautiful art. So cool to see this with the paste ups, the inking, the pencils. Beautiful, beautiful art. So if you are like me and love these absolute editions, if you're like me and you love Swamp Thing, this is the book for you. If you haven't read a ton of Swamp Thing, pick this up. Worth every penny. It's only $100. It's such a great price and value for what you get. Hit up your local comic shop. Hit up whoever you have to. Pick up this book. It is one of my favorite absolute editions now. I'm never gonna get rid of this one. You know, sometimes you gotta purge stuff. This is a forever book for me, and it's one I will definitely come back and revisit to very often. Make sure you check out all the other videos on the channel. I got some other videos going through absolute editions. Got some good horror. This is perfect for like the horror playlist that I have going on too. Got some other Swamp Thing videos on the channel, so make sure you check that out as well. And make sure you like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you're notified every time a new vid drops. And on that note, I'm out.